So I'm recording as well now.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sure David is going to be joining us shortly. He's just not quite here yet. Um, but Gordon is present, and it's Gordon is going to be talking today, and his topic, which he has, I have asked him to expand, and he will not expand. He is waiting to take the floor. Well, the subject is seeds.
Oh,
So, Gordon, over to you.
I have to apologize to anybody who is actually expecting a bit of horticulture. Um, the title, the word just came to me when I was in a hurry to find something to really cover what I'm going to talk about. And if anybody feels um, they could be better occupied elsewhere, so just don't draw the curtains and tiptoe quietly away, and I won't mind. It's my fault. However, um, where do I begin? I think the problem for me was the context of what might be the center of the discussion is as important to me anyway as the talk itself. Um, it, some time back, I actually copied all this down and put it under a heading, and I'll work through it as far as my fading memory and hearing allow. Um, where I have got a few notes just to remind me, and a bit more if necessary. Oh, but for the seed people who are really interested in seeds, I did notice last week that there was an article from a kind of the actress Kate, what's her name? Cat, Bob. She's an actress, and she got in touch with um, the gardens in Sussex, which I know and can't remember the name of that now. Um, which it works, which is the sort of country version of Kew Gardens, and they have this big um, program for making seeds freeze for 20 odd years or whatever, 20 degrees rather, minus. Um, and so Kate Blanchett um, talked about a little about that, and it did some real interest. I got distracted, obviously. So I'll start with the context, and it's the context when this process of thought went through me is as important in my survey as the topic, the main central topic of it all. Um, it it certainly involves a lot of memory work, and why that is important. Some years ago, well, quite some years ago, I was teaching in a junior school. Um, and the every day I began the work through the day with helping the children learn by heart a
Mm.
poem and a verse. And it wasn't always easy to find a poem or a song for that matter that was appropriate for children of that particular age and for whatever topics we were discussing. And I came across an article by a teacher in a private school, small private school, who was there at the time John Betjeman did a year's teaching there. I didn't know that. I do remember um, he'd left Oxford with no degree because his tutor, not supervisor, wouldn't, if C.S. Lewis wouldn't grant him one. And so I suppose he had to do what the lad does in Decline and Fall, Evelyn was novel, and go with wherever they would take him. My memory is such, I think he was actually hired to teach cricket. He's a televisioner, and uh, he also was very popular, according to this teacher who's now out of reach for me. And he said that when the class heard Benjamin with his class next door or underneath begin reciting a poem, he made his class stop and listen. This was such a persuasive voice he had. And again, part of the story was that he actually lay on his back while he chanted away, and everybody was silent for it. And the particular poem he was teaching them was something to do with, I think it was maybe even called Congo. It was subject was something in Africa, and and it was by a poet called Vachel Lindsay. Now, I never heard of Vachel Lindsay. I went along to the local bookshop and they hadn't heard of him. And the only option in those pre-Amazon, well, pre-electric days was to drive over to the so-called Kingdom of Hay on Wye, and there I went through several bookshops, and only managed to catch one copy of this. I can remember it now, green hardback, and to bring back home. I looked for it the other day and I realised it must have been given away, or I'd passed it on to charity out there. So I'm talking a bit from memory. I read through the poems, I looked through the poems, and frankly, most of them um, didn't seem right for in what I was seeking. Um, and uh, I looked through and decided against. There's one which I do remember and wished I'd used, but it was a bit long, called the Daniel Jazz, and that this actually prescribed to practice it with music. And apparently, Rachel Lindsay, who, as I say, was completely unknown to me, was close to Yeats. They shared the same idea that poetry should be musical, and it's in their delivery that they do this. Um, and I noticed some of the poems had long dedications to some great character who Lindsay obviously approved of. And lo and behold, up came um, a, the background for a poem by um, John Appleseed, Johnny Appleseed. They didn't talk, he didn't talk about him, but left a footnote at the bottom of where their copy could be got. And it was in Harper's New American Review of 1871. Well, those are days when it was difficult. So I went along to the library, the local town library, and said, any chance of you getting a copy of this? And believe it or not, I had a copy within a week. I mean, that for me was astonishing that in those days we could do so much so quickly. And in fact, I've got it here and may, if my mind finally slips, quote bits from it. So there we have it. That would be the center of it. And certainly to me, it belongs to a whole complex of ideas because as soon as I saw the name there, in my memory came from, I never thought of it since. Way back in 1948, I think it was. If you remember cinema practices then, there was a main film and a rubbishy film. I think after the war, there was still pictorial news for a short period. And best of all for a child was a Disney cartoon, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And among those was a poem, was a animation for Johnny Appleseed. And clearly, I mean, it was so fresh to me immediately. I could think of the little verse that goes through it and its tune. And of course, it's a very sweet, sort of happy folk hero. Disney apparently did make short, and it's accessible on YouTube, though strangely enough, you get bits of it, or if you're really lucky, you get loads of different um, uh, representations of it. Oh, hello, Ray. Sorry. So,
Apologies, fell asleep after breakfast.
Right now, let's see, where was I? Johnny, yes, this cartoon, um, and it clearly meant a lot to me at the time, and I didn't realize why, and to a certain extent, I still not sure why it should have remained in my memory. Others don't. Um, so um, I think the best thing would be, in fact, to talk a bit about Johnny Appleseed. He was a real character, a chap called Jonathan Chapman, and it's occurred to me. I think Chapman in English it derives from the word for a man who goes around selling things. And what did they call my mother called doll's eyes and flypaper man, who ran around um, distributing the news. Um, and he was born in 1774, which I think might actually mean he was an English citizen as well as American. 1776, I think, was the War of Independence. So Jonathan, sorry, Johnny Appleside appeared one day on a river of course, it was pioneers' time. Most settlements were still in the west coast, and there were pioneers going out. Well, Little House on the Prairie, those books are an example of what can happen. Um, but this character appeared apparently with two canoes lashed together and sailing down a river, which was probably the quickest way of traveling anyway. Um, and he was carrying two large leather bags. Um, these turned out to be apple seeds, and where he landed, where he thought there was suitable ground, he planted apple seeds. Um, the locals were farming, but it was wild country. It was um, well forested, um, and very, very dangerous. Black rattlesnakes, bears, wolves, um, and really dangerous world to be living in. But that was the only time he came in with his on my boat. Later, when he'd exhausted his bags of seeds, he would go back for more and would appear regularly throughout the year. And He's quite a character. I think in some ways, if I can find it quickly, yeah, this is the stuff. All copies of his life, very detailed. In those days, of course, it's um, you've got nothing else that can carry such a news. Um, yeah, right. In personal appearance, Chapman was a small, wiry man full of restless activity. He had long, dark hair, a scanty beard that was never shaved, keen black eyes that sparkled with peculiar brightness. His dress was of the oddest description. Generally, even in the coldest weather, he went barefooted, but sometimes for his long journeys he would make himself a pair of sandals. At other times he'd wear any cast-off foot covering he chanced to find, a boot on one foot and an old broggan or moccasin on the other. It seems to have been a matter of conscience with him never to purchase shoes, though he was rarely without enough money to do so. And goes on to say that one of the local farmers he was passing had a pair of shoes which didn't fit him, gave him to Johnny. Then a few days later, the guy who'd given him saw Johnny in the town barefooted again, and Johnny had said he'd met a poor farmer travelling out, and he thought he would be better him than to have them. And I said, he was very uh, his clothes well, difficult. Um, homespun and garment he'd use homespun and homespun and buckskin garments that the others would discard. He would think not very elegant or serviceable. In his later years, however, he seems to have thought that even this kind of second-hand raiment was too luxurious. And so he had a garment made of a coffee sack in which he cut holes for his head and arms to pass through and pronounced it a very serviceable cloak and as good a clothing as any man ever. Um, thus strangely clad. Oh, he construct yes, he is said to have worn a pot on his head, a metal pot, but it was too heavy and it didn't protect him much for his. So he had a contrivance made of some sort of flexible material with a big peak, and this was, what he wore. Um, but despite all this ridiculous clothing, he was always treated with the greatest respect by the people he went through. Indian villages regarded him as a kind of medicine man, and they would treat him very well, um, when he was going by. It was a very dangerous country. Did I say that just now? With black rattlesnakes all over, lots of them, um, wolves, bears, um, very most dangerous for to be traveling, particularly on your own. Didn't seem to matter to him. He was going. And later on, when the 1812, um, there was very unsafe because Indians and what were left of the British Army were going around killing and you know um, destroying everything they could. So Johnny took it on himself to hurry from farm to farm, giving them um, giving them instructions to leave as quickly as possible and to remain in hiding until he could tell them he was clear. Um, he didn't accept payment for any of his um, work that he was doing. Um, his seeds would germinate and they'd take them to plant, elsewhere. And the farmers themselves saw how useful this was and would cultivate their land with them. He'd always chosen suitable areas, mainly near the river, I think, um, to create these little orchards. Um, yes, there's so much about him. Um, yes, he never accepted payment from the people he visited. He would be given, if he stayed more than one night, he would be given um, uh, uh, food and allowed to sleep on the floor in these primitive cabins. And to do so, he would accept food, but he would preach. He was a great devoted to um, Swedenborg, a Swedish, Swedish um, uh, theologian who, well, there is still a Swedenborgian church in existence. And I remember meeting one of the members when I was at university, though he later changed his views. But Swedenborg, of course, is a very serious and well thought of at the time, serious thinker. Johnny also carried bits of the Bible around with him. Um, and he'd usually tear out a few pages and leave it with the people he'd been staying at. And next time round, he'd bring a bit more. He seems to have started, though he was born in the north, Boston, he seems to have started his expeditions from Pennsylvania, and I should think there may well have been a good deal of support there for what he was doing. I think to be able to carry uh, books around that he would preach from as he slept. Um, you know, as he lay there waiting to sleep, would be important for them. Makes me do we wonder though how literate the people would have been for to have read any of the things there. Perhaps the other preachers, would go around teaching where they could. He was a great respecter of life, of all kinds, um, and seemed never to have been affected by animals, though he was often afflicted by the insects. But he refused to kill them, if anything. He lit a fire, and if I saw the insects being drawn into it, and he immediately put it out. He um, was struck one day when a wasp or bee got inside his shirt, and rather than kill it, he gently picked it up and let it go. And he said, the Lord created these, and this I mustn't do damage to. Um, uh, I try and think of anything else. Yeah. Let's see. Uh, I think the idea of this simple life stayed with me. There's very little I can think of in favour of my own history, scatty and scattered as it was. But I've never been interested in money, as long as there's enough to survive on. And even now, you know, what's there's there, and why worry more about it? It, as I say, it's been something that's been very important to me in the background. And I realized once, much later than the time I'm talking about, I was with a very good friend of mine. We'd been Methodists in university. And he did say to me, he distinguished himself, CBE and honours and all sorts of things. And he said to me very impatiently one day, "How is it, Gordon? You've wasted your time like this. You had started off with the same um, talents that we seem to have had, but you've nothing much to show for it." And well, what's he on about? I even now think perhaps I seem to have got on pretty evenly, and he certainly has had to work extremely hard and sacrifice far more for himself than I did. The idea of a monetary career, no, it's not been my thought. Um, there is one other thing that um, I'll raise. It's not directly to this. Uh, there's a saying by a Danish philosopher, theologian, begins with K, and I won't try and well, I could Kierkegaard, but I'm told, of course, that foreigners spell better than they pronounce, and it's got some sounds in it which I can't make. Um, but he said, now where have I written that down somewhere? Get it right. Um, Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Um, and I think that's always thought encouraged me to keep the past alive, um, to learn from it when I go and treading into unknown country. Um, but it's a funny sort of thing when you think about it, so to say. I mean, I am clearly not in my past if I'm looking to it, and I'm equally clear I'm not in the future or whatever it is. So where am I? And that's just one of those things. I spend so much time looking back and thinking, yes, well, there's a pattern there, or I'm feeling a bit nudged into place there. There are things that seem to hang through, but of course, I then have to go. The eye has to go into unknown ground. Um, it's not an unknown phenomenon. There's one of A. Milne's verses. Halfway up the stairs is a stair where I sit. There isn't any other place quite like it. It's not at the bottom, it's not at the top. There is the place where I always stop. Halfway up the stairs isn't up and isn't down. It isn't in the country, it isn't in the town. And all sorts of funny things run round my head. It isn't really anywhere. It's somewhere else instead. And that, of course, is expressed very strongly by some of the modern poets. I always think of Yeats' poet, um, not Yeats, Seamus Heaney's postscript, where he goes through a casual drive in the countryside, and for a moment, with one of those brief periods where what is it, the veil of Maya disappears and you look through to something else. And as he's described that, he said, useless to think you can catch and package that more thoroughly. You are neither here nor there. A hurry through which known and strange things pass. Is that um sorry if that's a bit of a diversion, but that's about all I can say without losing my voice or any more hearing than I've already done. So if anybody has any thoughts which they could share, I'd be only pleased to hear them.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. I found lots of things there that really made me think. I mean, and of course the idea of the simple life is very much a Quaker idea as well, isn't it? Is that what drew you to what was the chronology of this? Or did you start off
Well,
as a Quaker and seeing,
it was he was first seen, I think, in 1806,
mm,
um,
oh,
early on in the 1800s, and he died oh, in the 1830s or 40s, I think.
um,
It says so somewhere in this, but small print. It'd take ages to find that detail.
no, I meant, did you find in your life that you became interested in this way of being, before you became a Quaker, or
Oh, yes. I mean, um, the looking backwards and trying to define, see well, life was, just back when I felt like it was like driving backwards, and running into one pothole, big pothole after another on each side. And then after a little while, there seemed to be some direction, that was there if I could only trust it. And of course, trust can be mistaken, but uh,
and anybody else like to say anything?
sorry.
No, no, I'm just inviting.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Go on, has he? You're muted. Okay.
You're still muted. We can't hear you, Hattie.
Oh,
Maybe
oh dear.
muted. Doesn't show it.
No, you're
It
muted,
doesn't show that you're muted, but you are.
but we can't hear you.
Oh dear.
I share the thought. Well,
Um, can we use the chat box? Not that I know how to do it particularly. I know
That,
we have one.
that's a
Um,
little bit cumbersome, but that may be the only way we could get to hear from Hattie at the moment. I'm not sure what's wrong with her audio. Sometimes in the there's in the bottom left of the screen there's this little drop down called audio, and it can test your audio and things like that, Hattie. But so worth a try to see if you can establish a channel.
A little message now
Yeah.
from
Come back to the topic. I don't know a lot about Swedenborg or Johnny Appleseed, but I understand that Swedenborg was very much a sort of a mystic with some direct perception. So that puts him somewhat in line with George Fox as a genuine mystic, more than just a theologian, not a theoretician, but a practical experiencer who doesn't put God in three separate boxes and call them some trinity, but talks about it as three aspects of the divine. Hattie, have you managed to get anything working?
you sent a chat message. I saw it just now. It's
yeah.
gone.
Right, yes. When you are
When
talking, I thought of the Jain religion, which is harm nothing living. So, yes,
Yes.
there you go. Yeah,
Is it, that's
that
sorry.
yeah, yeah,
corresponds with
it's
not hurting a fly.
I think
Yeah.
it's pronounced Jane rather than Jane. But
Whatever. Uh, uh, Gordon has already commented on the English being better at spelling than pronunciation.
yes, I suppose one of the things which I recognised in that was, I spent a number of years living as a hippie, basically, where we had virtually nothing but each other and relied upon society to actually give us food, like going into bins, which people uh, supermarkets had thrown out, and we used that type of thing. It was sorry about that. It was the having not having a lot and sharing what one had between each other, and not harming people, but expressing love for life and getting up in the morning and thinking, "Hey, it's another day. Let's
Mm. Mm.
let's go among people," and also the Hare Krishna groups who also would feed anybody. You go to their place and there would always be food, and you would consume it with each other. That was the type of thing I remember. But yeah,
Yeah, well, the Sikhs don't do this, don't they? Sikh in a religion, they prepare meals for whoever needs them.
mm.
Mm.
And I think yeah, it's more a giving to community, which I think in this 21st century we've kind of lost a bit, where, as you say, your friend was caught up in the consumer society, which was like that. And just give you a moment.
Oh, Hattie's got an unmute sign now.
Oh. Mm.
There is a postcard which I'll try and show, but I don't know if you'll be able to read it somewhat, but I'll show it anyway.
Bye,
And
I got work harder and earn more money. Um,
bye, and keep going.
wait a minute.
Yeah. a simple life.
I think it's just wonderful because it does emphasize a bit, that work hard, earn more money, buy more things, and then keep going, keep doing that, keep in a circle, rather like a hamster in a cage on a
Yeah,
wheel.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ooh.
Hattie has her unmute sign now, or at least I show it. It appears on mine.
Yeah.
Never land.
Unmute.
Well, one of the things that I've been finding really relatively recently, I mean, I'm afraid I grew up with my mother was poor, but she was desperately keen on cleanliness, which to her meant killing any insect that dared get anywhere near the house. And as for the garden, she was a keen gardener, but she killed every small thing that moved. For some reason, butterflies were exempt, but she was terrified of moths and all of the creatures that crawled. She just killed them. And although I changed my views about that as I got old, um, I calmed down and I realized you didn't need to actually exterminate half of the creatures around you. And also, as I got to have more animals living with me of my own, that also changed my attitude. So I did learn differently from my mother. Um, but it's very difficult completely to get rid of that very strict upbringing in that sense. But I do think I've been very pleased recently because I found I'm actually catching very gently. I got a special bit of kit to catch wasps, for example, that get into the house and gently taking them outside, for example. And to me, this is a very special thing to be doing. It makes me feel part of the universe in a way that I never did before. So I've not only stopped, I mean, I stopped actually killing lots of things quite a long time ago, but actually encouraging their life, provided it wasn't in the kitchen. I do like them out of the kitchen, really. You know, but it's made a difference to
Yeah.
how I feel about life as a whole. And I have found that interesting. I like to see it as some form of personal improvement. I hope it is. I'd like to know how other people feel about other forms of life entering their homes, actually.
It sounds as though Johnny Appleseed was quite happy living in the country with all kinds of beings and being very gentle with them. I wonder if Gordon's got anything more to say, Gordon, on why you feel connected to Johnny Appleseed and inspired by him.
Mm.
Well, I can't be sure about the effect of the film when I was young, but I do remember that I'd got no idea what I was going to be when I grew up, um, and never thought of it. I was challenged once by one teacher and what I wanted to be, and I said, "Well, I want to be an archaeologist." And he looked at me and said, "Can you spell that word?" And I just had to accept that I was being rather strange. But being archaeologist is something different. There is well, better not go into that. That sounds like another talk. Really, the whole process of archaeology. Um, as an adult, I stepped out into the world. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, oh yes, the other ambition I had was never, ever, ever to be a teacher. And to come to have spent far too much of my life being in that position. I mean, there's a distinction between people teaching and people learning, of course. You can teach your way to as long as you want. But if you if you aren't actually connecting to the is that, well, central to education for me is the teacher's presence with the child. We talk about an education system here, which is defined by the government to pass on their vague instructions to universities and further education places, which then say, well, to get to there, you've got to do this at A level. And if you get to then you've got to be doing it at GCSE level. And if you get that, you've got to be doing reading and writing when you're six. And it's the wrong way around. I mean, the center of teaching, center of education is the teacher with the learner, um, and it's quite a difference. Um, I did do quite a lot of work when I was teaching in school with adult literacy people. It was the time when it became a national concern back in the 70s, and I was attached to Cambridge House Literacy Scheme and um, the local education authorities did, taught classes of adult illiterates, and also Open University at the other extreme. And it was very interesting to me how different it was relating to one or only a few children or adults. Um, you know, Open University stuff required teaching people in prison or completely isolated who are homebound, and you felt quite different about what you were trying to do. I mean, in schools, you apply for a certain job, and the job has a certain definition. No, mm, sorry, I'm just straying into
It's interesting.
something that is a bit individual, and but I do feel that the talk about education system is, not the right way to look at it.
Hmm. I think the only experience I had with actual education or trying to teach someone or some that in that sense is a chap who once came up to me and they said, "Can I have a word with you?" I was working at a youth club at the time, and I said, "But yes, of course. What do you want?" And he said, "I want to learn how to read." And this is a chap, he was in his what must be in his 40s. And I said, "Yes, right, right." And he said, "Can you help?" And so I actually went away and spoke to a few people and came back with some documents and a little bit, and we slowly progressed, him and I, to the fact that in the end he could read reasonably well. And I said, why did you want to read at the moment? And he said, well, I've just become a grandfather and I want to be able to read to my granddaughter. And this threw me completely. And I thought, yeah, but how had you managed before? And explained to me the devices he'd used. And it was quite remarkable, this was a one-to-one thing. And he didn't want, I didn't want payment or anything like that. It was just the joy of
Yeah, yeah.
giving something to somebody else that I had. And I think that's part of what I got from what you've been saying is that you do these things because you can, but you have gifts which you can give to others, and because they're there, because it's something they need. Is that anywhere near what you were thinking along the lines going? Maybe not.
Um, I'm not sure, Gordon. Gordon, I think Ray was hoping you'd say something.
Sorry. Oh, failed.
Oh, he would got a um,
Yeah.
got
No,
a,
no,
we've got
let us carry on,
yeah.
shall we?
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. It's I've had huge problems with hearing recently. I've discussed. No, it's really disgusting. I've got wax in my ears apparently, and you have to pay. I have discovered to have it removed, which is very shocking to me because I grew up with the NHS and I have enormous faith in it. And I was so shocked to hear that I was going to have to pay if I wanted to have my hearing improved any further. So. But, because Hattie's going to be talking to us about hearing in a couple of weeks' time, so that would be good. But, you hearing okay in this today in general, Gordon? Can you hear me all right?
I hear, well, gaps in, with hearing, there's all sorts of things that go on. It's not a whole blockage. It's bits of your sound that disappear.
Yes.
And
I think a lot of it could be our networks, because um, I talk to people on the phone, and these are people we haven't had a problem before, and all of a sudden they're missing chunks of what I'm saying. And I don't know if it's because they're updating the lines or something, or whether my provider has decided to save money or something. I really don't know. But it's certainly a nuisance. I made a little note actually. There was something I was really interested in before being a respecter of life, which was certainly interesting. Where's it gone?
well, there's one thing about that I should perhaps have added to talk of a context for a particular subject. How should I put it? Oh gosh, my memory, it's pretty hopeless to lose. Start off saying something and wondering where you are halfway through.
I think that's common to us all. I
Oh,
really do.
most definitely.
Yeah. I think we've actually lost Ray's shining face for a moment, but hello, you're still with us. That's good. Um, no, there were a lot of things that interested me. I mean, but particularly, I guess, this respect for life, which I developed a lot since becoming a Quaker. Um, it has taken me a long time. Um, I wonder how much of it is because I grew up surrounded by tales of the Second World War. Don't know who that was. No, but
Oh yes, I've just remembered what I was trying to say.
okay, you go ahead.
There it goes again. Um, Memory.
Hmm.
I think what is clear from, at least to me, is that memories are overlaid with one on top of another. One brings out others. You can't have a memory on its own. I saw recently a, a portrait of the singer Dave Bowie, or Bowie, or whatever you call him. And it was the painter was somebody called Finer, Finer, and it's in the National Gallery. And what you look at is an outline of the profile of the fellow's head, but it's all a matter of patches over it, no no features that in fact the artist would recognize something and put something about the subject and put it something over it, so that you've got this very weird idea of a portrait. And after all, an artist does try to look behind the, what appears on the surface, not to everybody's satisfaction. I remember Churchill's wife was not at all pleased. I think did she destroy the painting of Winston? Certainly she wasn't very happy with it. But after all, I say that's what a painter does try.
Mm.
And the well-known historical one of those is the painting of Richard III, who is regarded through Shakespeare as the villain. And in fact, he seems to have been a very thoughtful man and would get a lot of mockery for being his scoliosis or whatever, his bent shoulder.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
Gordon, as you spoke, I was reminded of a chap. What's in the back of my mind is combining action with, teaching or a message. And there's a chap who appears on Facebook. And I think he visits areas around Portishead and Pill and Portbury and so on. But he calls himself the Phantom Gardener. And he plants apple trees or fruit bushes on wasteland, and places like wasteland along the side of railway lines or on the edge of villages and so on. And he takes a photograph of himself wearing a phantom mask so that he can show people where he's planted these trees and fruit bushes to encourage them to go and enjoy the fruits. But his message, of course, is to do with the environment and encouraging people to plant trees, for the environment and to provide food for birds and insects as well as humans. So as I said, that's what came to my mind when I was thinking of Johnny Appleseed, combining action and teaching a message.
Yeah. Yes, it also made me think about the pieces of the Bible or that he left around. So you could say he was an early forerunner of the Gideons. I mean, long before I became a Quaker, I was often really pleased to find a Gideon's Bible in hotel rooms when I was moving around, and it was on occasion, it was really helpful to have that. I would only read a bit, but it was a good thing to have there. And I think perhaps we ought to be doing a bit more of that, maybe leaving bits of, it needn't be from the Bible, but I mean, bits of Quaker wisdom, perhaps. And perhaps we should be scattering it. And I think we could, it's not a big, wherever we went, we could be taking little bits of paper with something important on and leaving it for someone to find. I don't know why I didn't think of that before. That's a really good idea.
Wasn't there a girl who went round leaving books for anybody to pick up?
Yes. Well, that's another idea. I've got an awful lot of books.
Yes, it was. I think it was called a traveling books or something like this. They were left in cafes and on railway seats and other things like that, encouraging people to read it and pass it on to other people.
Yeah.
It's less. It happens less and less nowadays, but I do know it happened because I was the recipient of a few of those books and made sure they got passed on to other people. But yeah, it's a good idea.
Mm, mm.
But
I think,
it's not only, I think, the kind of uh, the physicality of things, but also it's the fact of uh, giving out, not giving out, but uh, doing things of wisdom and doing things of like that which you pass on to other people, without wanting uh, any due praise or anything like that. Basically, you do that because you think it's right, and the 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 peace testimony within Quakers, I think, is a very good thing, which we express to everybody. Well, I express to everybody I find, and sometimes can get they think, well, here he is again. But hey, that's me. I was with my brother last weekend, and he was going to a friend's house, and he said, "Now, before we get there, I expect you to behave yourself." And I said, "What?" And he said, "No kind of off-road ideas, nothing which is going to make people cross." And I said, "Well, I can only say I will chat to people and get them to think about things. It'd be nothing confrontational. It'd be," and I said, in quotes, "nice things." And And he said, "Well, your idea of nice things may conflict with other people's. So if you go too far," he said, I will probably kick you." And I said, "Oh, thanks. Really nice of you, brother." But there you go.
I hope next time that Patty will have her that Hattie will have her sound sorted out. She's obviously getting occasional inspiration and has dropped in a note saying, oh, where did it go? Julian does a sweet job with artworks and giving them to us with good, sensible sayings. Thanks, Julian. But I see you nodding your head and doing things enthusiastically, Hattie, and feel that you would have more to contribute if we had your audio working. But there you go.
Is Hattie's problem about bad network where you are, Hattie? Is it a bit?
We
Actually, it's not always like that, though.
it won't be the network because it would affect the video as much as the sound. It will be something to do with the settings on her computer or on her audio device that isn't quite gelling. And so,
On my device, Hattie has the mute
no,
at the bottom of the
sorry,
page.
sorry, Gordon.
Me? Sorry.
The only reason I got a new computer, which I wouldn't have wanted other for any other. Well, there was the background. Apart from the background, I was told I wouldn't get updates anymore, and I didn't really know what updates were, but I was afraid they would stop the computer working. So that's why I bought a new computer. But I don't know. I may have been being a fool. Perhaps I should have taken more advice about whether it was necessary to do it. I mean, what happens if you don't get updates,
Uh,
David? Do you know?
yeah. Well, we're all children in this world, but if your computer doesn't get the latest updates, then things gradually stop working with each other properly, and bits fall off. It's just like not staying healthy as a human being. You find that bits stop working well, your ears aren't working as well, this, that, and the other. It's the same thing. If you don't keep looking after your body, it stops, bits cease to function as well. And it only really affects old people. Young people stay up to date with technology simply because they're always interested to have the latest gadget. And so it isn't that I've got to remember to get the updates, it's that they've got them anyway. Us oldies have to remember. So a friend of mine got a new computer, having found he couldn't update it. And he was sufficiently out of date that it wasn't able to transfer his passwords from his old computer to his new one because there was three versions of the operating system. So, it pays to stay in step. So getting a new machine, I think, is in general a good thing. And you've got it, Patsy. You find that there are some things that, oh, it doesn't do this anymore, and I'm going to have to learn that. But by the time you've figured it out, you're all right. And Hattie is probably Hattie is in one of those moments where she's looking at her kit and thinking, "Well, I'm not sure what's going on here." So it's one of those moments where you're trying to figure stuff out, and then you figure it out, and then you're in the flow again.
Maybe it's good for our brains. I mean, this is a happy thought, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think my computer got some inspiration yesterday by being at the National Computer Centre, um, where its big brother, where its
Oh,
big
wow.
big brother was sitting in a great big building being water cooled and doing this is I read a piece about it, which was that it could do a calculation that if every human being on the planet started doing their bit of the calculation, uh, uh, then they would need to have started 8,000 years ago to do what it could do in an hour or something like that. So, but the truth would be that the calculation that you would be doing would be one that probably wouldn't bother you that much personally.
Okay.
Whereas seeds are lovely, and it's good to hear from Gordon about spreading ideas and living naturally and being in tune with the divine.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Right then.
shall I
Mrs. Patsy, what are we doing next week? He asks, hopefully.
We are introducing a new member, a new Quaker who has joined Bristol Central, a young man called Oliver, and it's his day off next Friday. Well, he has arranged it, so it will be his day off. So he is going to be present, and he's going to talk to us about why he became a Quaker, what he's up to that he feels meshes well with being a Quaker, and he will answer any questions we like to put to him. So that's Oliver Wheeler, I should say.
He has joined us quite recently, and he has fitted in exceedingly well, and is very active.
Yeah.
So I look forward to his chatting to us.
Great.
Well, humble apologies for coming in late. I sat down with a book and after breakfast and sadly fell asleep. But there's so There you go. You were waving at us, David, then. Was it something you wish to say or just expressing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much, Gordon. Very, very interesting, very thought-provoking, very
Yes,
thought-provoking.
thank you.
No, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right then. Bye, everybody.
Right.